Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. Well, I am Lalema Aneja Dang and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत। प्रतिदिन की तरह कार्यक्रम में लाएंगे आप तक देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार। चर्चा के लिए आज कार्यक्रम में आमंत्रित हैं आर्थिक विशेषज्ञ ए.के. भट्टाचार्य। ए.के. भट्टाचार्य जी, स्टूडियो में आपका स्वागत।
नमस्कार।
और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ हैं लालिमा नेजा डैंग।
Thank you, Vishal. Domestic stocks witnessed losses of more than 1% amid negative global cues. Sensex closes below 51,850. Nifty settles near 15,400 level. Rupee weakens to 78 rupees and 38 paise against the US dollar, and Brent crude prices decline around 4.5%.
कमजोर वैश्विक संकेतों के बीच घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में 1% से अधिक की गिरावट। सेंसेक्स 51,850 से नीचे हुआ बंद। निफ्टी 15,400 के करीब आया। डॉलर के मुकाबले रुपया कमजोर होकर 78 रुपए 38 पैसे के स्तर पर हुआ बंद और ब्रेंट कच्चे तेल की कीमतों में करीब 4.5% की कमी आई। कार्यक्रम में बात सबसे पहले शेयर बाजार की। कमजोर वैश्विक संकेतों के बीच प्रमुख घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में आज 1% से अधिक की गिरावट दर्ज हुई। सेंसेक्स लुढ़ककर 51,850 से नीचे बंद हुआ। निफ्टी फिसलकर 15,400 के स्तर के करीब आ गया। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 1.35% के नुकसान से 710 अंक घटकर 51,823 पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 1.4% के नुकसान से 226 अंक नीचे 15,413 पर आ गया। व्यापक बाजार की बात करें तो बीएसई मिड कैप सूचकांक 1.53% और स्मॉल कैप सूचकांक 1.11% के नुकसान में रहे।
The Sensex and the Nifty today plunged more than 1%. Both stock indices fell amid negative global cues. The Sensex closed below 51,850 points. Nifty settled near 15,400 level. The Sensex declined 710 points or 1.35% to end at 51,823. The Nifty plunged 226 points or 1.4% to finish at 15,413. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid-cap lost 1.53% and the small-cap index ended 1.11% down. In the Sensex pack, 4 companies logged gains while 26 declined. TCS gained 0.3%, Hindustan Unilever climbed 0.2% and Power Grid added 0.1%. On the other hand, Tata Steel lost the most as it slipped 5.2%, Wipro declined 3.3%. Reliance plunged 3.1% and IndusInd Bank fell 2.7%. In sectoral indices at the BSE, all 19 sectors logged losses. Metal sector slipped the most as it slipped 5%. Basic material fell 2.6%. Energy and realty both declined 2.2% each. Power sector plunged 2.1%. The overall breadth of the BSE trade was negative as shares of 1,250 companies gained while 2,081 fell. Shares of 109 companies remained unchanged.
जी,
Rupee?
और रुपए के प्रदर्शन पर नजर डालें तो अंतरबैंक विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपया 30 पैसे कमजोर होकर 78 रुपए 38 पैसे प्रति डॉलर के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। विश्व की 6 अन्य प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की मजबूती मापने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स 0.09% की वृद्धि से 104.53 पर था। भट्टाचार्य जी, शेयर बाजार की अगर हम बात करें तो कल हमने देखा एक रिलीफ की रैली जो थी, एक राहत भरी रैली थी। कल बाजार में 934 अंक की बढ़त के साथ बंद हुआ था सेंसेक्स और आज फिर हम देख रहे हैं 1% से अधिक की गिरावट है और 710 अंक नीचे आ गया। कल की तुलना में और आज हम देखें तो ऐसे कौन से फैक्टर्स आपको लगते हैं कि जो आज की गिरावट के जिम्मेदार?
देखिए, एक जो रिलीफ रैली जो होती है
जी,
वो सिर्फ एक दिन ही नहीं थी, 2 दिन थी। 2 दिन लगातार हमने देखा कि स्टॉक मार्केट में बढ़ोतरी हुई है और वो उसको हम रिलीफ रैली मानेंगे। रिलीफ रैली का जो एक स्ट्रक्चर होता है कि वो रिलीफ रैली उसके बाद वो टेस्ट करता है मार्केट को कि कितना उसका रेजिलियंस लेवल है। मुझे लग रहा है कि जो रिलीफ रैली हुई है उसके बाद मार्केट आगे बढ़ने की जो क्षमता रखना चाहिए थी वो क्षमता मार्केट में नहीं है, क्योंकि जो चारों ओर विश्व की खबरें और भारतीय अर्थनीति की अंदरूनी जो खबरें जो आ रही हैं वो ऐसी कोई आशाप्रद नहीं है जो मार्केट को आगे बढ़ा सके इस वक्त। तो इसीलिए मुझे लग रहा है कि ये जो रवैया चलता रहेगा, ये 51,000, 51,200, 52,000 में चला जाएगा। सेंसेक्स की बात कर रहे हैं हम। तो जब तक ना कोई ऐसा कोई सस्टेनेबल ट्रिगर आएगा जिस ट्रिगर से जो अर्थनीति की, कॉर्पोरेट अर्निंग्स की जो ग्रोथ में सस्टेनेबिलिटी नजर आएगी, तब तक मैं समझता हूं कि मार्केट में ये नरमी बरकरार रहेगी।
Mr. Bhattacharya, we managed through the post-COVID period with Sensex touching beyond 58, and now then the Ukraine-Russia war happened. How do you see why is this to stay around 51, 52? Is this the stabilizing? Is this you think where we will stabilize? Because the markets have been volatile in the last few days. The war has been going on now. It seems like a bottomless pit, no sign of ending. So, what are the factors that are leading to this after having touched 58, which was really marvelous for Indian markets?
Well, there are many factors at play here. One, as you said, if there had been no Ukraine-Russia conflict, then probably the markets would have gained from the post-COVID recovery.
Right.
Now, clearly, the post-recovery gains that were expected have been unsettled, neutralized by the Ukraine-Russia war, and nobody, as of now, can actually predict how long this conflict will continue. Given the recent statements made by the Russian President, Mr. Putin, it looks that the Russia-Ukraine conflict is not going to end very soon. Now, you go across the Atlantic, you will see that the U.S. economy is facing one of its worst crises, where interest rates have been raised by 75 basis points. Mm-hmm. There are clear signs that there will be many more rounds of interest rate increases.
Yes.
Those increases will be sharp. Therefore, the fears of recession are very much there. The bond market have already become inverted, which means that the short-term rates have become lower than the long-term rates. Mm-hmm. Now, in such a scenario, with inflation at 8%, with the UK inflation at 10%, where there was a massive railway strike in the UK for wages. Mm-hmm. Germany, because it doesn't have supplies from gas from Russia, is trying to switch over to coal, for which it is facing resistance internally and externally because of its climate change commitments. So if you look at Europe, look at US, and of course induced largely by the Russia-Ukraine war, you see a global environment of capital flows very, very volatile and uncertain. Mm-hmm. Take the Indian situation where the growth prospects are still a little better than what is happening elsewhere. Yes. Even RBI is talking about a growth rate of 7.2%, although the World Bank thinks it is more, it should be 7.5%. But inflation is still elevated, and what is more important is that 2 days ago, the Ministry of Finance issued a monthly economic report which talked about the dangers of a twin deficit, which is that the fiscal deficit get widened and the current account deficit also will get wider. Now, in this kind of a scenario, we probably cannot expect that with macroeconomic headwinds, the stock markets to behave as if all these factors didn't exist. The only silver lining, I would say, is the confidence which is shown by the corporate sector. The stronger corporates, the companies are still showing signs of higher sales, riding a little bit of inflation, but also in terms of the corporate earnings growth are still showing signs of some sort of resilience. So that is the global and the domestic scenario in which the stock markets are behaving. So in this situation, to answer your question, to believe that the stock market will make a very quick recovery is something that only a brave heart will bet on.
जी भट्टाचार्य जी, जो शेयर बाजारों में जो गिरावट, घरेलू शेयर बाजारों की अगर हम बात करें तो जो गिरावट का एक प्रमुख कारण ये भी माना जा रहा है कि एफआईआईज ने बहुत बड़े स्तर पर क्या कहते हैं पैसा निकाला है,
$40 बिलियन
भारतीय शेयर बाजारों से, और डॉलर लगातार मजबूत हो रहा है और साथ ही साथ बॉन्ड यील्ड भी अमेरिका में बढ़ रही है। इसे देखते हुए एफआईआईज अपनी जो बिकवाली का जो उन्होंने एक ट्रेंड अपना सेट किया हुआ है अभी, क्या उसको बदलेंगे इसे देखते हुए भी?
मुझे ये नहीं लगता ये जो बिकवाली का जो दौर जो चला हुआ है ये इतनी जल्दी सुधरेगा, क्योंकि स्टॉक मार्केट को एक चीज बहुत नापसंद है, वो है अनसर्टेनिटी। अभी तक ये सर्टेन नहीं आया कि जो यूएस फेड का जो इंटरेस्ट रेट बढ़ाने का रवैया ये कब तक चालू रहेगा और उसका एंड पॉइंट क्या होगा। जिस दिन स्टॉक मार्केट को मालूम हो गया था कि कोविड का प्रकोप इतना होगा और इससे ज्यादा नहीं होगा, स्टॉक मार्केट खराब वक्त में भी उसका जो रिस्पांस होता है वो उतना वॉलेटाइल नहीं रहता है। आज की तारीख में अगर आप देखेंगे चारों ओर विश्व में अनसर्टेनिटी की जो एक जिसे हम कह सकते हैं एक काली बादल जो छाए हुए हैं, उसके लिए जो स्टॉक मार्केट की इतनी नर्वस रिएक्शन आ रही है।
घरेलू शेयर बाजारों की बात करें तो अब अगर यहां से और अधिक गिरावट आती है तो क्या आपको लगता है कि रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स जो हैं और जो डीआईआईज जो हैं, क्या वो भी बिकवाली की तरफ बढ़ेंगे?
देखिए, मार्केट जो है, मार्केट में हर वक्त जैसे हर चीज में, इंडियन इकोनॉमी में भी आप देखेंगे एक द्वैत चीज होती है, डुअलिटी जिसे हम कहेंगे। वो अगर आप ओवरऑल मैक्रो मार्केट को देखेंगे पूरी तरह में नहीं, उसमें वीकनेस दिख रही है, पर अगर आप माइक्रो सेक्टर्स में देखेंगे ऐसे बहुत सारे सेक्टर्स हमारे मार्केट में अभी भी हैं जो सेक्टर्स की जो रेजिलियंस जो है उनको ये मार्केट को जूझने की क्षमता, अर्निंग्स को बरकरार रखने की क्षमता अभी भी अटूट है। तो मैं ये समझता हूं कि जो रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स जो है उनको इस वक्त ये देखना है कि वो किन स्टॉक्स जो मार्केट में रहने के लिए आपको एक स्टॉक स्पेसिफिक एजेंडा अडॉप्ट करना है, ना कि एक ओवरऑल इंडेक्स स्पेसिफिक एजेंडा आप अडॉप्ट करेंगे। एक जमाना था कि अगर आप इंडेक्स स्पेसिफिक एजेंडा अडॉप्ट कर लेंगे आप मार्केट से अच्छी मार्केट में प्रॉफिट बुक कर सकते हैं, पर आज की तारीख में अगर आपको मार्केट में रहना है तो आपको स्टॉक स्पेसिफिक एजेंडा को फॉलो करना पड़ेगा,
और वो भी लॉन्ग टर्म पर्सपेक्टिव लेके।
Mr. Bhattacharya, we see that when we talk about the rupee declined by 1.5% in May, but the currencies of China, Brazil and South Africa declined by 4.3, 4.5 and 5.4% respectively. Do you think there is a merit in containing volatility? Defending the rupee could affect competitiveness and increase risks?
Well, I think the way, if you look at it from the Reserve Bank of India's point of view, the Indian rupee has been defended to some extent. After all, the Reserve Bank of India has used its reserves, according to some reports, almost to the tune of $20 billion. That money has been flooded into the market so that the rupee depreciation that is calibrated. Now, to some extent, this is a good policy because any sharp fall in the rupee can induce a lot of uncertainty and also create inflation which is led through imports, because the moment the rupee depreciates, the import costs go up hugely. So what the RBI is doing is that trying to do a bit of soft landing for the rupee, and which is what you have seen from around 75 rupees to 78 rupees. This is today is probably the first day after several weeks, I would say, where in one day you have seen a depreciation of 30 paisa. Otherwise, you have seen a depreciation of 3 paisa, 2 paisa, 5 paisa. So I think what RBI is doing is a gradual, calibrated depreciation of the rupee. But in spite of that, I would say that the direction of what you call the nominal exchange rate and the real effective exchange rate, the trajectories are diverging, which is not, from an economist point of view, a good thing, because ultimately the nominal effective exchange rate and the real effective exchange rate should coalesce. Today, your real effective exchange rate is much, much higher than what it is today in the nominal effective exchange rate. Now, if the nominal effective exchange rate also goes up and tries to meet the real effective exchange rate, I think it is a good thing for the economy, because the competitiveness of the Indian industry will increase. Our export share are likely to get better, but there is only one danger, which is that there will be imported inflation.
Yes.
So finally, it is a call that the policymaker takes, that what route does he or she takes, and how she or he manages to calibrate and mix the various policy responses to get the optimum result.
It's an extremely tightrope.
It is a tightrope walking. You snatch those words from my mouth.
Yeah, because to ensure that inflation is under control, to ensure that there is less liquidity in the market.
Absolutely.
So we don't envy the policymakers.
Not at all.
Yes, and we have further news. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will deliver a keynote speech virtually in the opening ceremony of the BRICS Business Forum today. The Prime Minister will attend two-day 14th BRICS Summit hosted by China beginning tomorrow. The summit will be held in virtual format under the theme of Foster High-Quality BRICS Partnership, usher in a new era for global development. During the 14th BRICS Summit, deliberations are expected to be held in areas like terrorism, trade, health, traditional medicine, environment, science and technology, innovation, agriculture, technical and vocational education and training, and micro, small and medium enterprises. Discussions are also likely to be held on issues like reform of the multilateral system, combating COVID-19 pandemic, and global economic recovery. BRICS is a platform for cooperation of major emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. The BRICS members are known for their significant influence on regional affairs. And now we're going for a short break. We'll be back soon.
उपभोक्ताओं तक पहुंचने का सुलभ और सस्ता माध्यम है आकाशवाणी।
आकाशवाणी के विभिन्न केंद्रों से कीजिए अपने उत्पादों और सेवाओं का प्रचार विज्ञापनों के माध्यम से।
लोकल और राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर कीजिए अपने बिजनेस का विस्तार, क्योंकि आकाशवाणी में विज्ञापन बुकिंग हुई बहुत ही आसान। अब घर, दफ्तर या दुकान पर बैठे बैठे आप कर सकते हैं विज्ञापनों की बुकिंग। डायल कीजिए 870-001-4242।
नंबर एक बार फिर नोट करें, 870-001-4242।
ब्रेक के बाद कार्यक्रम में आपका फिर स्वागत। रुख करते हैं वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों का। ब्याज दरें और बढ़ती मुद्रास्फीति की चिंताओं के बीच एशियाई शेयर बाजारों में आज भारी गिरावट दर्ज हुई। दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी 2.7% और हांगकांग का हैंग सेंग 2.6% लुढ़क गए। चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स 1.2% की गिरावट में रहा। सिंगापुर का स्टेट्स टाइम्स सूचकांक 0.8% नुकसान के साथ बंद हुआ। जापान का निकेई 0.4% फिसल गया। यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों की बात करें तो यहां भी गिरावट का रुख रहा। अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में लंदन का FTSE 100 1.2% लुढ़क गया। फ्रांस का कैक 1.7% और जर्मनी का डैक्स 2% के नुकसान में रहे।
A look at the U.S. markets. Major U.S. stock indices jumped more than 2% yesterday. The three major indices gained as investors bought stocks at attractive prices after a steep sell-off last week on worries over a global economic downturn. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index rose 2.2%. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite both surged 2.5%. Mr. Bhattacharya, you just talked about recession a little while ago. Is it for real that there are murmurs all over the world globally that recession is coming, or is it just a paper tiger? One first, and the corollary to that is the ruble is strengthening now. Do we see a threat to the dollar somewhere close by the strengthening of the ruble, or is it a far cry?
Well, to answer your second question first, I think dollar is still a strong currency in the sense that it still occupies more than 50 to 60% of the global reserves. That's the dollar strength. So it is not easy to to replace the dollar, although the Chinese would love to hear that. And dollar still has its acceptability, its strength, which will take some time before it can die out. Coming to the dollar's relative performance, I think what is happening is that inflation being very high in the US and inflation in some of the other emerging economies being lower than the US inflation right now, the dollar index is showing those reflecting that movement, where the dollar vis-a-vis the let's say the Indian currency, the Indian currency would have depreciated much more if the dollar had not weakened at the same time. So that is number two. Number three, what is happening to the US recession is that the technical definition of recession is that 2 successive quarters, if there is a decline in output, then there is a recession. Now the first quarter, which is January to March in 2022, US did experience a contraction. Now the debate that is going on in the US and globally is this: will the output in April to June quarter will also show a contraction? There are some early reports that it may not be actually contraction, it may be a positive thing. So technically you may say that US may not be in a recession, but there are a lot of people who point out to the high frequency indicators to show that already the US economy in the second quarter may have reached the contraction stage, and therefore technically US may well be in the recession, if not going into a recession in the next few weeks. So that is the level of concern and the debate that is going on. Why recession is so important? Because the moment recession happens, there are a host of other associated triggers that get activated in terms of, let us say, the US Fed's reaction, let us say the kind of packages that get released for assistance to people. So I think recession is a development that everybody is watching very closely, and I would say that sooner or later, if not this quarter, maybe in the next quarter, you may have to talk about a recession once again.
We've had a lot of reforms in our country, all kinds of reforms. We're talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat. We're talking about, there's so many other things which have happened, support to the MSMEs, and in the realty sector, the laws have come, NPAs, So do you think India, in case, this is a worst scenario, in case recession happens in US, are we better cushioned in India? Are we better placed? Because we are a consumer-based economy. We have a huge population, which can be an asset.
It's a good question. Compared to the last such threat that took place, 2013-14, when there was a taper tantrum, India's current account deficit was very high. Or again 2008-9 when the global financial meltdown happened. Compared to those scenarios, today the macroeconomic fundamentals certainly in comparison are better. You have still considerable around $600 billion of reserves to play around with. Your inflation is high, but it is still at 7%, not the kind of inflation that we saw in 1991-92 of 17-18%. Right. Interest rate is going up, but it is still at 4.5% at the repo rate level, or 4.75%. Now, the question is that we have the economy, I think, has the resilience to withstand a shock, but not to take necessary remedial action in response to the challenges like the twin balance sheet deficit, twin deficit, or problem of inflation or a problem of unemployment will not be a sensible approach. And the sense you get is both from the government as well as from the RBI, there's a clear recognition that things need to be pulled up and things are not as good as they ought to be. So therefore there is concern and action is being done. No government likes fiscal deficit being high and inflation at this level because it's politically suicidal. So I am reasonably certain that action will be forthcoming, which is why you have seen various responses from the government policymakers, and whether it is a duty cut or a duty hike in exports or a duty ban. You may quarrel over the nature of those responses, but I mean, everybody should be rest assured that the government is conscious of the challenges that lie ahead.
And like when you hear stories like 100 unicorns being set up and we are the world's third startup country, that gives you some kind of a silver lining. And
it does, but you know, but startup economy is probably the first segment of that Indian economy which will face a major challenge because of private equity money drying up.
Right.
So one has to be very, very cautious about the startup economy.
Right. A look at the oil prices now. While oil prices today plunged around 4.5% as traders grow increasingly worried that demand for the commodity will take a hit from possible recession caused by a sharp hike in interest rates aimed at reining in inflation. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $109.60 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were at $104.20 per barrel. Yes, oil, the whole geopolitics of oil, we are buying from Russia now at discounted prices. Where does that leave us?
Well, I think our share in our Russian, the Ural, has gone up from 1% to 18%. Many of the private sector oil refiners are actually importing that Ural and processing it and converting them into products and exporting them to Europe and even US. This is at the operational level. But I think the oil crisis that one had seen earlier is probably you are coming closer to managing it because the recession and the commodity price not going up any further is probably a relief for a country like India, which depends a lot on imports of these commodities. Coal import is another area where the coal prices have gone up, but they are now stabilizing. So both on the energy side, whether it is oil or coal, India can draw some comfort that the prices are not skyrocketing. On the contrary, because of the global recession concerns, they are stabilizing and even falling, as you just now said about the crude oil.
And the electrical vehicles and that renewable energy will take some time to settle down.
अब बात सोने की कीमतों की कर लेते हैं। मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज पर अगस्त अनुबंध वाला सोना आज 185 रुपए महंगा होकर 50,945 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर चल रहा था। जुलाई अनुबंध वाली चांदी 620 रुपए टूटकर 60,650 रुपए प्रति किलो के स्तर पर कारोबार कर रही थी। न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोना मंदी के साथ $1,830.70 प्रति औंस, जबकि चांदी $21.45 प्रति औंस पर कारोबार कर रहे थे। भट्टाचार्य जी, बहुत संक्षेप में जानना चाहेंगे कि महंगाई जब बढ़ती है, कहा यही जाता है कि सोने की कीमतें बढ़ती हैं, लेकिन अभी हम अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर देखें तो सोना जो है $1,830 के आसपास ही चल रहा है।
देखिए, जो हो रहा है मार्केट में इस वक्त कि इक्विटी और मार्केट से पैसा अभी तक गोल्ड की तरफ नहीं पहुंचा है। जब पहुंचेगा हम आप देखेंगे कि गोल्ड के प्राइस का भी इजाफा होने को दिखेगा आपको।
भट्टाचार्य जी, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आप कार्यक्रम में शामिल हुए और हमें श्रोताओं को इतनी बहुमूल्य जानकारी दी। शुक्रिया,
नमस्कार।
And before we close, friends, as a reminder of the headlines, domestic stocks witnessed losses of more than 1% amid negative global cues. Sensex closes below 51,850. Nifty settles near 15,400 level. Rupee weakens to 78 rupees and 38 paise against the US dollar. And Brent crude prices decline around 4.5%. On that note, it's time for me, Lalema Aneja Dang, and my co-anchor Vishal Sharma to bid adieu. That's all we have for you in this edition of Market Mantra. Namaskar. Market Mantra.